Thank you very much, and I bring my greetings of President Abbas to the Delphi organization, its participants, and to Greece, a very good friend. I really wonder how to deconstruct what you have not yet constructed, and whether it is possible to really manage this whole thing by just ignoring the problems that are there and will be there if you don't do anything about them. I know the problems are difficult, but really you have to deal with two basic problems. If you can't, I don't think you can really manage a new architecture, as this thing is suggesting to do. A new security architecture requires dealing with the Palestine-Israeli problem and requires dealing with the Syrian problem. I mean, without dealing with these two problems, it will be very difficult. It has been really aroused by the gas find. I mean, the gas thing has just inflated ambition and hopes that something can be done and that every one of the countries of the Eastern Mediterranean can make something out of it. I mean, we tried in Gaza with British oil, with British gas, about 10 years ago, to start our operation of producing gas in Gaza. And then the company was forced by the Israelis to stop trying. And we think of ourselves as a potential producer of gas in Palestine. But there are serious other problems on defining sea borders. I mean, there are problems between Palestine and Israel, between Israel and Lebanon, between Lebanon and Syria, between Turkey and Cyprus, between Cyprus and Israel and Egypt. All of these problems have to be settled to define really what sea borders and who has the right to dig in what areas. And secondly, there's the question of transportation. And at the beginning, Israel promised everybody that it will send the oil through them, promised the Cypriots, promised the Greeks, and promised the Turks, and ended selling its gas to Egypt to liquefy it and sell it as LNG to Italy to go through that route into Europe, with all the promises that had not really been carried out. There is not even bidding process for pipelines to Greece or pipelines to Turkey or pipelines to Cyprus. So these questions need to be resolved. And gas has really made this urgent. Although the gas there is only 1% of the world's reserves, and it will not last for a very long time, but it's an important asset, and and it could be a prize for peace instead of being seriously mismanaged by lack of ability to resolve the problems. The two problems are there: a chronic problem, an old problem that can explode into acuteness between Palestine and Israel, whether that happens in Gaza or in the West Bank or in Jerusalem or anywhere else. And that problem has to be handled. And of course, the Syrian problem. There are so many players in the Syrian problem. I agree with Mr. Arad. And some of them are playing directly or playing proxy for others. Yes, but there is a possible solution. I mean, Russia plays a serious and important part, and Russia has good relations with all the parties, with the Syrians, the Israelis, the Iranians, and the Turks. And therefore, a solution of the Syrian problem, which started actually with the American occupation of Iraq in 2003, which destroyed Iraq, created Daesh, spilled into Syria, and from Syria into Europe, costing you in Europe a huge amount of money, dealing with the issue of refugees and dealing with the issue of terrorism by Daesh and so on, which was a result of the American occupation of Iraq, exactly as Al-Qaeda was a result of the American occupation of Afghanistan. And therefore, this has to be handled. I mean, it cannot be just ignored or somehow thrown back in the wastebasket until somebody has the guts to really face it. I think the Syrian problem should be easier to solve than the Israeli-Palestinian problem. Although the Israeli-Palestinian problem has all the requirements for an agreement. We agreed on a two-state solution. We signed an agreement by our two leaders, Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin, in Washington, in the White House, chaperoned by President Clinton. And then we've been in many, many other attempts to reach an agreement and to make that agreement work. so far, it has not worked because Israel still occupies every inch of the Palestinian territory, because Israel builds settlements all over the country, because 6,000 settlers who existed in 1980 after the Egyptian-Israeli Camp David Accords are now 650,000 settlers that have actually controlling 62% of the land and 93% of the water. So the question is, I mean, it can be solved. If you commit yourself to the agreement signed, it can be solved. And then you can go into a solution of the problems facing the gas and facing trade and facing our Eastern Mediterranean becoming a bridge between the Arab world and the Islamic world and the European world, with Greece really as an important factor in this game. So I really think that maybe there is some chance with this change in the world into a multipolar world. We cannot accept Mr. Trump's solutions. I mean, he gives Jerusalem away as a gift. He takes it off the table. He dismisses the refugee issue. He decides what he wants. But we've heard him make similar decisions in other places, in Mexico and with China and with Iran and with so many other places. And we have to look at a world that is changing, a world that includes America, of course. America will remain a great country, but it will not be the only one. It will not be the controller of any peace chance in the Middle East. There will be Europe, and there will be Russia, and there will be China, and India, and Japan, and Brazil, and South Africa, and Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. I mean, this is a multipolar world based on international law and based on the United Nations Charter and resolutions, has a chance of reaching an agreement between Palestine and Israel as two independent countries side by side, in peace, not only with themselves, but with all the Arabs around them. I personally was highly involved in writing the Arab Peace Initiative that brings in normalization between Israel and the rest of the Arab world. If this is done, then you can attend to the issue of finding a new security architecture in this Eastern Mediterranean. You can then attend to better ways of dealing with the exports of gas and the transportation of gas. This will be easier problems to handle. Don't run away from the real problem. Solve the problem of Palestine. There will be peace, and there will be gas, and will be prosperity, and there will be a much, much better life for the Israelis and Palestinians, Arabs, Greeks, and Europeans. Thank you very much.